about a year and a half ago while I was in Manchester, working in the theatre there. We R&D'd the show with David and Ioli, the choreographer, and some Mancunian actors at home in Manchester. And then after that, we decided that we would like to take it further, applied to the Arts Council, got some funding, and found this amazing group of performers with whom we've been rehearsing for the past 3.5 weeks, so not too long, but just enough to start creating this, which will hopefully take further. If you have any questions, would be more than happy to answer. If not, I can start asking some questions. But if you have, we only have 15 minutes available, so if you have any questions for us, please. Yes?
I was wondering whether, having taken part in this, the question is the actors, I guess, whether it's changed your appreciation of society or the way people treat each other from before to now.
Great question.
I don't know if it's made me change it, but it's made me be more aware of it, I think, do you know what I mean?
The idea of isolation. Yeah.
Because it's
being
never
an outsider.
we've never experienced it personally, but so it's not made us change our opinion, it's made us relate to it, I guess, and understand the experience maybe slightly more.
And I suppose because Gregor's never present, because we never really personify Gregor, but there is also always that there's an omnipresence of him. He's just around. He just occupies this space, but he's never actually physically there himself. I suppose from my perspective, it's allowed me to gauge a perspective from the outside in, towards somebody who maybe feels like an outsider or is ostracised or shunned away. Personifying the father, having oppressive figures, sort of beaming down on an individual. I suppose it's just allowed me to get more of an insight into
maybe why you might do that.
Exactly. Why they might feel the way that they feel. And it's particularly exacerbated in the play because it's a sort of a Kafkaesque society, which is very it's under the whip and crack of capitalism as well, where you have to work, and it's kind of exacerbated even more. But
and also just like the everyday nature of some of the things, so that you obviously this is such a larger than life kind of version, but in the process you start having conversations and people kind of pop up and you realise that it's not just as massive as not being a bug. We weren't allowed to say he was a bug in classes, but the kind of idea of being so ostracised that you're locked away and you were never seen, but actually the conversations that you have, whether it seems harmless, but actually those kind of actions can be the most harmful. So those kind of conversations were really interesting to have.
Those subtle, like the way when you view someone as less than, and sometimes it's not massive harsh actions like we have to get rid of it, and it's not, as extreme as that, but it's the slight, when we all turn and just notice his room. It's that kind of awareness of like other.
The elephant in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't want to address
unspoken kind of thing, which I think often happens within families when someone's so different.
Yeah.
in society
different
as well.
from them,
Exactly.
They can't understand.
Ostracizing them. Any other? Yes?
At what point did you introduce the text into the process then? How did you do that?
Yeah, first day. So I had the script ready on day one. We did tweak it.
It changed
Quite a lot.
Yeah. Pages were cut.
I mean, no, the general like structure remained, but we cut a lot.
We cut a lot.
And we moved,
Tweaked words.
swapped things around in order to match the movement we were doing and things like that. So.
Exactly, yeah. But the actual structure, the decision of keeping certain bits, removing other bits, had been there. Just because we didn't have enough time to also spend like a week just devising or working with no script. That would have been. It would have been interesting to do that all together, but because we didn't have that time, I tried to do as much preparation on my own as possible, so then we could start with at least having something concrete.
It was really interesting because we had, so on the first day we read both Emily's script and the original, so we would go, because there's part 1, part 2 and part 3, so we read part 1 of Kafka's version, and then we read Emily's version, and then we did the same in part 2 and 3, which was great because this is obviously 50 minutes, but there's so much in there that we don't say, but we show that was in the original, and it's so helpful as well playing the characters to have an awareness of that,
Exactly.
even if we're not saying it.
So as I was writing the adaptation, I was also making a list of images or potential ideas for the movement that were directly drawn from Kafka's story, which we used and recreated without saying them, without ever using them as part of the narration, but creating them as images instead.
I think it was also quite important to recognise that obviously Metamorphosis is written in German, and we were working between a bunch of different translations, and they all try and do this thing where they try to recreate some of the comic or some of the ironic elements of the German language, and to do that it makes the English really quite convoluted and really quite awkward. So what we did was actually try to distance ourselves a little bit from the German, to try and make a thing that works in English, to the strengths of the English language, as opposed to try and recreate, like through implication, the intricacies of the German way of things.
And we did not tiptoe around that. If we wanted to cut something, we cut it. If we wanted to change something, we changed it. Which was really refreshing. Because it's kind of, sometimes it's hard when you feel a sort of irreverence to a classic text.
Of course we respect Kafka.
Of course.
It was for the best interest of the piece.
Yeah, of our piece, because it is 50 minutes and we did have to be a little bit ruthless.
Yeah. Can I just say that visually what was really powerful for me was the spitting of the blood behind the wine.
Oh, yeah.
Because it made sense of something growing, because it was each time you spat it out from, with nothing there, and this growing, and me not knowing what was going on behind there, and that for me was the whole essence of this piece, because it's a written piece, but to have it off the written page into a visual, that whole bit there was just amazing, and it gave that sense of what is going on behind there, and I don't really realise how powerful just that piece was.
Cool.
Come join us, Ioli, if you want. We've started. Ioli is the choreographer and the movement director, but I don't think we have enough chairs. Yes, and I think that's also, it's a hint of how everybody in the family contribute to Gregor's murder. There is a sense of like this, it's wine that she's spitting, but it looks like blood. It looks as if there's murder happening behind the cloth. Or even then the father's spilling the red wine on the white floor. There's something about how they contribute to that, to Gregor's death, without knowing, or
inadvertently, but through their absence of affection towards him.
Yeah.
From where I sit, it felt like the beginning was just perfectly cued. So are you cued on the fly, or was it just really good luck? Because the moment they closed the door, there were still people coming through the door. The moment they closed the door, you started dancing. So it looked just perfectly choreographed.
It was cute.
It was cute. So the music
on the fly.
It's the music gets louder
as a change.
So wherever we are in the sequence, we know that when that music happens, and there's a lighting cue with it as well, so we know that that's when we start again.
When most people are in, we begin. But the whole idea of the whole piece is how trapped they all. Gregor is definitely trapped in his own room, but the family feel that they are trapped within this tragedy. So all these loops, all that repetition, doing those sequences again and again and again and again, mirroring how they just find themselves more and more trapped in that routine and that everyday life, as they are trapped in the movement sequences.
Yeah, for me, and going back to kind of your first question about the process as well, we've had lots of chats in the cast about as you're growing up and you're sort of identifying yourself as someone in society and what you kind of represent, we were always talking about nature and nurture and how much of it is from your upbringing and how where you're from defines who you are. And I think it's even more of a thing now with politics as well, of somebody has to be able to say this is who I am, or comment it online and say this is what I stand for. And I think through doing this production, it's kind of made me actively think more about the kind of person I want to be or I'm trying to become, and has brought these conversations in my family as well of what does it represent to be part of my family, like what do we define ourselves as to be a member of a family.
Yeah, and we were saying
and for me, I related myself a lot with Gregor, but in a foreign perspective, because although I am most of the times very well treated here, is this known place, because you are here for so much time, and then you still don't feel at home, but then when you go back to your country, you're not at home as well, and you are different than they're expecting you to be. So it's this sort of known place when you're different. And sometimes as well, like everyday society, people, they kill us little by little with comments, with attitudes, and sometimes they're not realizing it. Like it's just like a method. For me, the salvation of the society would be empathy. I think we just should exercise everyday empathy over and over, because then you can put yourself in the other's place and then try to treat the way you would like to be treated. So I think Gregor, all these elements of the piece, like the wine and then the broom on the wall and then the violin, is just a way of showing how we sometimes die little by little every day with, you know, society, but not only from people, because of the chaos we've been living now. So I can relate myself a lot, all of us.
But that's how Kat was joking that I wouldn't let you use the word bug in rehearsals, because I didn't want to make another Metamorphosis about a cockroach, and Gregor is not, and Kafka wrote it as a parable. He didn't allow his publisher to have a cockroach on the front cover. He didn't want to see Gregor. He didn't want to depict him, because it's a metaphor.
He never says exactly what kind of thing he turns into.
And in the German, the Ugenziffer is even more abstract than the insect. And the idea from the very beginning was that Gregor is anybody that could feel excluded within his own family unit because of their sexuality, because of their religion, because of their views, because of their political views, because of the job they choose for themselves. Just this feeling of not feeling part of your own family because you're different.
And we were saying as well, like, I feel like because of who you are within that family, often people go out into society still as that role. Do you know what I mean? So often if you're the youngest child and then you go out and you still let people treat you like the youngest child, do you know what I mean? So you still have those relationships. Yeah.
But you're also saying about like how it's the reason that like it's Gregor who gets turned into whatever it is he gets turned into and gets isolated. If it had been the father who had this transformation and he woke up, how would he use that transformation in a completely different way? And it's that whole thing that you have this kind, like, giving person who gets isolated, as opposed to an oppressive person who comes in. Like, if the father had been turned into this insect, how that would have completely changed the whole story. And the reason, you know, obviously Kafka is, and you know, like, and how you take from how an author writes and who you're sympathising with, and to have the fact that you have, it's easy to crush certain people, and that's why certain people can feel crushed, and it should never be that way. And you know, like that idea that who it is, and actually it's often, you know, the kind of people, the people who are willing to sacrifice, and then the unappreciation of.
But that's it. If a child doesn't feel appreciated within their own family, how can then go out into the real world, into society, and be a functioning citizen if they haven't received that appreciation and love and support within their own family unit? That's why the father
figure was really, really important to me because of that. He treats Gregor with such brutality and harshness that then, of course, Gregor just wants to disappear rather than ask for help.
And how often the oppressed or the isolated or the abused blames themselves? Like how often they think they are the guilty ones, not the oppressor. So I think the way you were saying, like Gregor, even though he was the biggest victim, he was always thinking like, oh, maybe I am doing something wrong, or maybe it's the way I look.
He was burning with shame and grief, but he clearly didn't have a reason to feel ashamed. Any other questions?
Well, just basically that society doesn't learn from its mistakes, which is a tragedy worldwide.
Yeah.
And the very last line where it says, where you say, I will choose your husband, you just look at the person sitting like that side and think, we know where this is going to go.
And then she becomes the person who's oppressed. You know, like
exactly.
She becomes
another victim.
It's a cycle, isn't it?
Yeah. And I just think like it's human. Well, maybe it's human nature that we want a tribe. You know, we want our team. And then we isolate ourselves from anything outside of that. And so it's no wonder that then if something changes within your tribe, it's this is different. Don't like this.
Where would you like to take this next?
Where?
So, no, where, as in, what's the next metamorphosis of this plot?
International. No, I think obviously we made this piece for the festival, and Charlotte is there, and you chose us, and thank you very much for hosting us and for giving us the opportunity to make the piece for this festival. So we made it for the Tristan Bates for this space, but I've always envisioned it for a bit of a bigger space, just so we can allow the movement to not that I love the claustrophobic nature of the space, but there's something about having a vaster area to play with all our liquids and
more extreme things.
More extreme things to happen in a bigger space.
Bigger fridge.
So give us a bigger space and we'll destroy.
We did want to get in the fridge.
I did try to get in the fridge.
Yeah, but the idea is definitely now that we've had this 1 week run and we've seen what works, what doesn't work, what else we could do, is to go away, talk to people, see if we can take it elsewhere in London or even in festivals, and then have a longer run somewhere.
Fingers crossed.
Yes. Any final questions before disappearing? We have our final show tonight, so that's really, it's exciting but also very sad. So thank you all very much for coming. Really appreciate it that you stayed for the Q&A. I hope you enjoyed it.